Hello, everybody. So we're just wait a few minutes, give people a chance to get in here. I hope everybody's having a good week thus far. Um, yeah, so tonight we'll be back to the new stuff. I will, I'll go over what we'll be covering in a few minutes here. So while we wait, King will reign supreme and always have an under fight. So join in the jubilee. Cats are raging overseas, mixing with the ladies' past. Being charming never lasts. Gain will reign supreme and always have an under fight. So join history and always have an undersight. So join in the jubilee. Cats are raging overseas, mixing with the ladies' pants. Being charming never lasts. The game will reign supreme and always have an under fight. Oh, join in the jubilee. Cats are raging overseas, mixing with the ladies' pants. Being charming never lasts. Game will reign supreme and always have an undersight. Oh, join history and always have an under fight. Oh, join in the jubilee. Oh, 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 oh. You can win it with you. All right, so let's see. Come along with the snorks. Swim along with the snorks. So much to see waiting for you and me. Have some fun with the snorks. If you could breathe underwater, where would you go? If you had friends underwater, who would you know? Come along and sing along too, yeah. Come along with the snorks. Swim along with the snorks. Happy to see waiting for you and me. Have some fun with the come along with the have some fun with the snorks. Okay. Dennis the menace. Dennis the menace. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Scooby Dooby Doo, looking for you. Scooby Dooby Doo, where are ya? All the stars are here, waiting for you. Couldn't have a show without ya. Scooby, Scooby Doo Doo. Hey Scooby, where are you? Over here. Papa Bears, Papa Bears, Papa Bears, Papa Bears. Fantastic. Fantastic. Hmm. Game will reign supreme. Always have an under fire. Oh, join history. And always have an under fire. Oh, join in the jubilee. Cats are raging overseas, mixing with the ladies' band. Being charming never lasts. The king will reign supreme. And always have an underside. So join in the jubilees. Cats are raging overseas, mixing with the lace pan. Being charming never lasts. King will reign supreme. And always have an underfight. So join history. And always have an underside. Join in the jubilee. Cats are raging overseas, mixing with the ladies' band. Being charming never lasts. Game will reign supreme, and always have an underfight. So join in the jubilee. Cats are raging overseas. Oh, 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 oh. You can win it with you. Alrighty, well, let's see. So 7:44 here. So yeah, we're coming up on the 8-minute mark. I guess it'd be a good time to start getting ready to go over what's on tap for tonight. What we'll be talking about. So I've got 6 stories. Hello, we got a second person here. Hello. Hope you're doing well. Just about to go over and thank you for the like and share. And get some more friendly people in here. That would really help. Also, I'm about to go over what we'll be covering today. Hey, Woody. Let's go, Brandon. Yeah. Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. Anyways. Okay. So, here's what's on tap. So we got 6 stories to go over. 5 comic related, 1, well, yeah, I guess technically 4 comic related, 1 anime related, and 1 animation related. Let's see, Neil Gaiman's got some things to talk about in terms of explain certain things about the live action Sandman series on Netflix. Anime Extra apparently had some problems over it, weekend. Let's see, what else do we have? We got some news in regards to Boom Studios and IDW. They got some announcements coming out. We're going to also look at, according to Frank Martin of Bounding in Comics, the 10 best Batman villains. And also, let's see. What else? And also, according to Frank, 10 villains that tortured Spider-Man the most. So those are the articles we're going to be looking at tonight. Also, we've got our niche news, our niche history segment at the end, of course. And we'll be doing a bit of a wrestling roundup with stuff going on. We got a couple of big events coming up this weekend on Saturday. WWE is, of course, having SummerSlam in Nashville, and then on Sunday, Jim Crockett Promotions, under, of course, Jim Sr.'s son David and Conrad Thompson, will be promoting an event that will feature supposedly, quote unquote, Ric Flair's last match. So, also got some news with regard to AEW as well as Impact. Impact Wrestling's got a event coming up in a few weeks here on August 12th called Emergence. I'll talk a little bit about what got planned so far for that. So, without any further ado, why don't we go ahead and get started on the articles here. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at here is we're going to go over this article. Article from J.B. Augustine here, published yesterday. Sandman creator Neil Gaiman explains why Tom Sturridge won't be a, in quotes here, Snow White dream in live action Netflix series. With Netflix's adaptation of Neil Gaiman's Sandman confirmed to be race and gender flipping certain characters, there are a lot of changes being made to the series in its jump from the page to the screen, and creator Neil Gaiman has a reasonable explanation behind the decision. Oh, okay, excuse me, folks. Chloe's barking again. To be the man, you've got to beat the man. Yep. And I'll be right back, Woody. Apparently Chloe is acting up, and of course my sister's not here to shut her up. So, well, looks like Chloe came back in on her own. Anyways, let me just do something real quick. Alright, then. So, anyways, getting back to Get back to the article here. The author broached the subject of and why the Endless being depicted as more human compared to their bleach white print counterparts on July 19th after sharing a preview photo from the upcoming series showing Tom Sturridge's dream sitting on a bench talking to Kirby Hal Baptiste's death. Quote, "It's just the beginning," teased Gaiman. In response to his tweet, a fan queried the author, quote, "Hey, Neil himself, Neil himself, can I ask you something? Is there some kind of stretch effect on Tom that makes him look the way he does? In this photo and in the snippets we've seen, I know he already looks like Morpheus, duh, but there's something off about him in stills and clips." This is, I guess, from Johnny Kirchner. "Quote unquote, no," replied Gaiman. Quote, "Everything about Morpheus is 100% unenhanced. Tom Sturridge, including the musculature and body shape when he's naked in episode 1. The only CGI on his face is very occasionally giving him Morpheus's eyes. But you haven't seen any of those in any photos released so far." See if anybody responding. Nope. All right. Well, anyways, continuing on here then. The author's initial response then drew another question from a separate fan who further inquired, quote, "Was it a creative decision not to give him Morpheus's paper white skin as well, or is that also going to appear occasionally?" Unquote. And we have Scott Jekyll Johnson. And then to this, Gaiman explained, quote, "We started out with a Snow White Morpheus with all black eyes and huge black hair. Tom looked like someone cosplaying impressively, not like someone who would be able to walk the waking world more or less unnoticed. So we pulled back until it worked," quote unquote. He added, quote, "And yes, sometimes he's pale," unquote. Notably, while Sturridge's pale appearance has been demonstrated in the teasers and trailers for Sandman, it's unclear whether that's due to the actor's natural complexion or a combination of intentional lighting and color correction. For instance, said pale appearance can be seen in the series' new trailer, which debuted over the weekend at the 2022 San Diego Comic-Con. We have, all right, thank you for popping in. Thank you. And as always, guys, if there's anything that you take notice of that you want to comment on or ask about, feel free to do so. packed with a number of first looks at the series cast, including Boyd Holbrook as a Corinthian, Jenna Coleman as Constantine's ancestor, David Thewlis as the deadly Dr. D for Destiny, and the aforementioned Hal Baptiste's death. The 2-minute plus clip revealed not only Sandman's high contrast, light and dark visual direction, but also its serious tone. To that end, Ladder sparked more than a few fears that even further alterations to the source material, such as removal of Death's celebrated sense of humor, were incoming. However, met with such an apprehension by a fan on Twitter who asked, quote, "I've noticed that the scenes shown so far, Death, have been from instances where she is somewhat serious. I'm curious, will Death in the Netflix Sandman series have the bubbly personality of Death from the comics? Or is that totally changing?" Unquote. Gaiman allayed any fears regarding the character's personality. Quote, she's absolutely the same Death in the comics, unquote, he said, explaining that the trailer was cut to convey a certain tone and doesn't reflect the series in its entirety, unquote. Quote, and the nice people who choose the bits that go into trailers have found the most serious bits they can, unquote. The Sandman and all its quote unquote serious bits dare to quote unquote dream dangerously on Netflix as of August 5th. Leave a comment if you plan to watch. Alrighty then, so there we go with that one. Hey RJ, I've seen the trailer. I'm not extremely excited about it. So many changes from the book series. So RJ, let me ask you this. Do you think Neil Gaiman is trying to blow smoke up everybody's rear end? I'll ask that, of course, again, just in case. Do you believe that Neil Gaiman here is trying to blow smoke up everybody's rear end? Anyways, I'm going to step away from the computer for a moment. I'll be. Neil Gaiman is catching his check. Okay. So basically, kind of like what Chuck Dixon explained last night on Pop Stream, right? I'll be right back. Just step away. Just gonna go away from the screen for a moment here. Put some music on for you guys while Right, I'm back. Alright, so anyways, do we move on to the next article here? So apparently, I guess Anime Expo had some issues this year. So let's see what they're talking about here. Anime Expo's return to physical event reportedly marred by attendee mistreatment and staff mismanagement. Article by Nerdigans Inc. published yesterday. Let's see. Given its reputation as one of the best anime conventions in the world, just about every Eastern media fan's dream is to attend Anime Expo. And after COVID-19 lockdowns forced the event to go virtual for the past few years, the announcement that it would return to an in-person format only doubled the excitement for its 2022 incarnation. To that end, one would think that after 2 years in lockdown, common sense would dictate that the organizers of Anime Expo would be completely prepared and pulling out all the stops to host an amazing, unforgettable comeback event. However, based on a variety of factors, Anime Expo 2022 will instead probably go down as one of the worst conventions in recent history. Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. Now, mind you, I've been to Anime Expo before years ago, went a couple of times, but just realized that um, it wasn't really my cup of tea. Just the larger conventions are not really my cup of tea. I prefer the smaller, more intimate conventions if I do go. Um, but yeah, so anyways, let's look further into what happened here. Yeah, they do make a point here that maybe after 2 years they would be fully prepared and stuff like that. But the opposite could happen too. Sometimes you can get out of practice and and maybe in the time and in your prep to return to live format, you can't maybe you can't get all the kinks out like you want to. So let's see what happened here. Throughout the convention, several vendors and attendees took to Twitter to expose what was really going on behind the scenes at the convention. Oh, that doesn't sound good when you start taking it to Twitter to female dog. One of the most notable of these attendees was Twitter user at Heat Deacon. Come on, Chloe. Excuse me. I'll be right back, guys. I gotta go tend to Chloe. All right, I'm back. Anyways, all right. So, okay, one of the most notable of these attendees was Twitter user Heat Deacon, who took to Twitter on July 1st to document the Expo's failings on behalf of their friend and her partner, who do not currently have active accounts on the social media platform, both of whom were slated to attend the event as vendors. Okay, let's see what happens. And again, if anything here catches your attention, feel free to comment on it. Yeah, Bleach right there. So, okay. The viral thread began with an image of one of the entrances to the Los Angeles Convention Center, where the annual convention is held, with Heat Deacon asking the expo directly, quote, "Hey, at Anime Expo, what's up with the way your vendors are being treated? Yesterday, they had to wait for people to finish chatting on their phones and smoking to check in, and now this," unquote. Um, let's see what. Oh yeah, I think I did hear something about that. In fact, we covered a story similar to that. Covered a similar story to this about a week or so ago as well, or a couple weeks ago. Quote: "They're forcing vendors to throw out all of their food and drink out to enter." Unquote. They added, sharing an image from their friend's Instagram story showing a supposed food and drink checkpoint. Quote, "Meaning those of us who don't have a big booth, don't have extra help, have to go 12 plus hours without eating or drinking. You all blow this bleep up on Twitter. I'm sick of this con. This is legitimately inhumane." Yeah, this. I don't know. I mean, why? The million dollar question is why would you? First off, that I don't think that's even constitutional. You can't force people not to bring their own food. Okay, they're trying to maybe make people go and buy the food on site. That's kind of stupid because some people may have specific dietary requirements where they can't just go to the fast food booth or whatever to grab whatever. Heat Deacon um, continued their documentation of Anime Expo's staff's unprofessionalism. Quote, "Meanwhile, AX staff is joking about all the free food they're getting. The woman in white in this picture confiscated homemade sandwiches from a vendor, then laughed at them and told the other staff members that they were going to have a bunch of free sandwiches for lunch now." Unquote. Yeah, that is kind of messed up. They're in essence, the staff are basically stealing the vendor's food. That's basically what they're doing. They're stealing their food. That's not even funny. And again, sometimes people have to have specific, have to, basically have homemade food or whatever, because there are some people out there who may have certain food allergies or have certain conditions where they can't just go and they can't like just go to one of the food booths at the convention or run down the street. I mean, aside from what he Deacon also pointed out with the fact that some of them that don't have the huge staffs, some of the smaller based vendors don't have huge staffs, so it's not like they can sit there and send people out for food, every few hours. They have to bring food in for them, to be able to eat, at intervals, so they're not going like if they were pointing out there 12 hours without, food or drink for that matter. So they can make a pretty good point there. I mean, playing devil's advocate here, I could maybe see, I could possibly see, the convention's rationale here if it's something where like they're saying, well, they don't want to risk because it's outside food, it's coming from outside. We don't want risk it being having COVID on it or whatever. Albeit that might be silly, but that might be. I'm just guessing at their rationale, but based on what she's saying, that's not even the case. These people are just being stupid and I don't think anybody know. Now again, the $1 million question thus far that hasn't been answered here from the convention is why were they confiscating the food in the first place? What was their actual rationale for confiscating people's personal food that they were bringing from home? Okay, or even if it was something they were bringing, if it was something, let's say they brought on their way, from McDonald's or whatever on their way there, but that's probably something different. But I think what she's talking about is people probably made, some pre-made meals so they'd have something to eat, since they probably couldn't leave their booths for extended periods of time. So, and again, if you guys have anything you want to add to the conversation, feel free to do so or ask about. I'll be glad to comment on it. Okay, so let's see. Let's get ready to move on to the next. I guess this is the Instagram post they're talking about here. Yeah, the woman in white, I believe, is the one at the far right here. Yeah, she doesn't really look like she needs a whole lot of sandwiches. She probably gets quite a few anyways. Probably another story for another day. The frustrating situation was further confirmed by other con attendees, social media, including at XX Yakai Sekai and at Single Sploot. Quote, trashed food, unquote, explained at Heat Dokken, of a photo depicting several confiscated bags of food and beverages meant for vendors. Quote, at a bleeping anime con isn't worth people being forced to starve for 12 hours. And they're right on that one. They are right on that one. That's total baloney. I mean, now again, we're still only hearing one side of the story here. We don't know why it's trash food right here. But again, one thing, of course, I'd like to hear, maybe that's what he Dokken was trying to to get at was what, if this was supposedly a part of AX's policy for this year, why was that? What was their rationale behind this if it was part of the policy? If it wasn't, then why aren't these employees being pulled aside and say, hey, look, you don't do this? But anyways, getting back to the article here, at Heat Dawkins then shared one of his friends' quote unquote post from yesterday, wherein said friend took issue with how the staff were allegedly on break during the convention's check-in window and exclaimed, quote, oh my bleeping gee, they won't check anybody in for an hour while they sit and eat sandwiches. I guess that's supposed to be the lady in the left screamed at some guy to get her a soda if he wanted to talk to her, like, bleep. Welcome to AX, everybody. This is what vendors deal with at these big cons, unquote. They use it. Yeah, who is the lady on the left? Yeah, she's supposed to be doing a job there, and quote, notice in smaller quotes, please respect our time, on the sign tweeted Pete Dakin. Yeah, it sounds like these people are a little bit more full of themselves just because they're working a big con. Yeah, there needs to be some attitude adjustment there. These people probably need to be let go. Well, I don't know if these are volunteers or if they were hired. If they were hired, they need to go bye-bye. They need to be fired. If a user, if they're volunteers, they just need to be asked to leave because they're not, that's just wrong. Quote, they were on lunch, but she told me after they finished they were smoking and on their phones, unquote. Quote, updating to add that my friend almost passed out and the options, in brackets, for food inside the convention center, are very limited. It's just her and her partner, by the way. It's a miracle she was able to leave the booth at all, unquote. At Heat Dawkins then noted presenting his followers with another Instagram post from their friend in which they can be read asserting, quote, had to pay $20 for 2 muffins and 2 bags of chips because I blacked out in my booth from hunger. Yeah, I mean, that's another thing too. Sometimes if you have to, like, buy the food in the convention center, that's quite a huge expenditure that, again, that they shouldn't have to put up with if they can help it. Taking notice of these initial tweets, Anime Expo assured at Heat Dawkins that they had begun an, quote, investigation on this issue, unquote, providing what is, as of writing, their only public comment on any of the accusations leveled against this event, Anime Expo later replied to a concerned fan with the explanation the above incident was the result of a, quote, a miscommunication, unquote. Quote, we have informed the security, unquote, they vaguely assured their followers, quote, if this incident happens again, please let us know, unquote. Yeah, that almost sounds like kind of a stock answer for, okay, we want to just say just enough to hopefully appease the situation and maybe the situation will die out. Well, situation as long as the staff behaves that way, continues to behave that way, the issues are not going to go away. And then you're going to have getting more people upset at you. You know, they may just decide to boycott. Yeah, there is huge money that can come from going to a big con, but if you're getting treated like this and you're not worth it to you if you're risking your health because you're not allowed to bring your own food in. And again, if that was the only communication AX provided, AX still didn't explain why they would even be thinking about taking somebody's food they brought from home. They still haven't given any kind of explanation for that, and I think that's a key thing too. Anyways, getting back to the article here. In an interesting twist, a few hours after publishing the thread, @HeatDocken returned to Twitter to reveal that he had received a series of DMs from the woman in the white shirt seen in the photo attached to the initial tweet. Quote, "Hey, Anime Expo," unquote. Quote, he tweeted, quote, "You're trying to use your staff as fall guys when you did not communicate with them, and most were hired within the last week or two. You have the biggest anime con in the country," unquote. And I guess here are some of the DMs and the woman. Keep things civil. According to screenshot shared by @HeatDoc, his DM exchange with the supposed staff member kicked off with her throwing Anime Expo under the bus, writing, quote, "The woman in white kicks off the DM throwing Anime Expo under the bus," unquote. Hey, this is the girl in white who you put in your picture. I'm really sorry that this all happened. The communication, information, and planning that goes on these events is so bad. I'd never worked any event like this one before, and I showed up to my shift today. The security guards told me right off the bat that no food or drink was allowed, so I started enforcing it. Yeah, that does sound like a little bit of a miscommunication, but again, why was okay? If the security guard did say that, then what's again the rationale behind it? What was the rationale behind it? Quote, I really shouldn't have joked about it, and I definitely didn't mean to make anyone feel as though I was laughing at them, unquote. She continued her apology, quote, I wish you had also heard that times I and the rest of the staff there said how bad we felt about the miscommunication. The security was under the false notion that there was no food or drink allowed, and that's they told me when I arrived on the scene. Okay. So it may have been a breakdown in communication, but that is kind of a serious breakdown in communication. No food or drink allowed in the convention center. If people are bringing in their own food, one to keep their own food costs down, obviously, so they don't have to pay $20 for a couple bags of chips and a couple of sodas, to where they're not going to pass out because they haven't eaten in 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous. Um, I mean, what was the rationale behind it, or was it a case where maybe it was just meant that there was no food supposed to be right there around the staff? I mean, again, we don't know what was the rationale behind it. But she further claimed it. Quote: It wasn't until it was too late that someone came and corrected us. Most of us were just hired within the week. Once I found out that we had all been mistaken, told the wrong information, we all felt bad about it. But did that stop me from being my obnoxious, small quotes, pick me girl self? Talk about it, and making humor of what was a bad situation from others? No. Yeah, well, you should have probably thought a little bit more about. I mean, yeah, I could see maybe if you were trying to make, okay, yeah, it happened. We goofed. I apologize, but you should. But in that that was something where you should have shown a little more real contrition there. Something where you should have shown a lot more contrition. Quote, I totally understand why you folks feel undervalued and mistreated, and I and I have been fired, unquote, the woman revealed. Quote, I think it was the correct decision and I've learned a valuable lesson. I'm sorry about the whole situation. I hope you understand that while I don't speak for the expo itself, personally, as a fellow human and a worker, I see how I misbehaved, and I am sorry for my lack of compassion toward the situation, unquote. Eventually, she concluded, quote, I really, really wish I had not listened to the security guards when I arrived and that I had confirmed with someone else sooner or did more investigating. Well, yeah, you should have, because that should not have made any sense to you whatsoever. Okay? The first thing you should have been asking the security guard is, why are people not being allowed to take their own food in? What's the reason behind it? Quote, I'm just gigging and trying to make a living out here. So I really wish I would stop getting in my own way by making these mistakes and hurting others who do not deserve to be dealing with that kind of stuff, unquote. The staff member explained, quote, I don't understand why the heck we wouldn't let y'all have your food, but I thought I was just following orders. I'm so sorry. Well, you that's the thing. That's probably one order you should have probably confirmed. That is definitely one order you should have probably confirmed. Asked by at Heat Duckin, who asked if he could make their exchange public in service of calling out Anime Expo, asserting the situation was, quote, not fair to anyone, especially if most of you were only hired within the last week, unquote, and opining, quote, I don't think you should have been fired at all. I think they should have trained you all better more than anything, unquote, the woman replied. Quote, I understand totally. To be honest, I would appreciate it because people are making comments about me being uh, fat and other ugly stuff, unquote. Yeah, well, I mean, to a certain degree, you kind of brought that on yourself by acting obnoxious, but yeah, people shouldn't, once the situation is resolved or to a point, you should just let things go. You shouldn't, you know, shouldn't be getting harassed after the fact. If that is the case. Quote, I totally get why you guys are upset. I feel so stupid for everything that happened, but I agree it has much more to do with the lack of training, lack of communication, lack of foresight on the comms part as a whole, unquote, she added, before ignoring the images that documented otherwise to claim, quote, they were the ones who were so kind as to offer the sandwiches to us instead of throwing them away, and I told them I saw a sleeping homeless man outside and that I would give it to them. We both shared some chuckles. Okay. Yeah, a little oblivious there, young lady. In a follow-up tweet, at Heat Dawkin shared a bit from the final portion of his DM exchange and alleged that the convention, quote, did not tell their staff the line was for vendors. If the line was for vendors and artists, unquote. As per the screenshot, the woman in white informed them, quote, thanks, I literally have never been to a con, so I didn't even realize that people coming in were vendors who wouldn't be able to eat for hours. I assumed everyone was just attending, and the reason they weren't allowed food was because they wanted to sell food indoors. only. Yeah, that's one of the things I pointed out too. Is that and that might make more sense if it's a case of if it's the attendees. If it's the attendees, okay, I can understand that. No outside food in, but if that line was designated for vendors and artists, then let them keep their food because they're going to be sitting there for hours on end. They're not going to go prompting at Heart Dokken to exclaim, quote, so they didn't even tell you they were vendors. Wow. That's just icing on the cake. So yeah, it basically sounds like I think some of the uppity ups at Anime Expo don't seem to give a hoot about people because, man, they didn't even train these people. They didn't. Oh boy, it sounds like there was no protocol whatsoever set up. On July 2nd, at Heat Dokken later presented additional DMs from, quote, current staff who wish to remain anonymous, unquote, wherein the employees, or I guess a typo there, informed them that, quote, Anime Expo was very disorganized in their training and miscommunication is a feature. You've been wow. I mean, you've been out of interacting with the public for like 2 years, and you come back and you're just ay. Quote, hi, I was a person working at a line entrance at AX, unquote. The employee began their lengthy message. Quote, there are several levels of people who seem like they work for Anime Expo, and different groups that have no contact with each other than in person on the day of the event. Security, volunteers, an event services company, aka COVID check, line entry people, volunteers. These people signed up to be there without pay, but their compensation is housing, if needed, and a badge. Elaborating on Anime Expo's questionable employment process, an anonymous staffer recalled, quote, several volunteers told me on Friday that they had minimal training or info. That's a third-part company that hired people with no interviews, even by Zoom, to work stations like entry lines. Yeah, that's not really. That's basically like saying, okay, we're just going to pull you off the street and just tell you to stand right here and usher people in. That's essentially what it sounds like they did. They just sat there and just basically told pull people just off the street, told them to stand right here and usher people in. That's not a good call there. Anyways, I gotta step away from the computer for a moment and just some lighting here. I'll be right back. Excuse me. Venom back. Let's see now. Let's see. Okay. Quote, that company did a training session on Wednesday for a few hours, unquote. They added, quote, but the majority of the training was spent with the low level hires, just sitting around waiting for the supervisors to attempt to figure out things that they didn't know from AX or just simply hadn't planned ahead of time. Yeah, it sounds like they really kind of like the people at AX really did a number on themselves here. Anyway, um, the employee continued, quote, the low level hires were repeatedly told things like, if you don't know an answer, try to Google it on the FAQ on AX website or direct the guest to the help desk, quote unquote. Um, we were given very little actual info in person. Almost everyone that the attendees interact with, they aren't AX employees. There's just a huge level of disconnect, unquote. Yeah, not good. This is how, like, quote, we're told to ask questions if anything comes up, but not temporary all of the temporary weekend hires are being proactive at all, unquote. They acknowledged, quote, my heart was breaking today about how disorganized everything was. I did see lots of comments online about AX had 2 years to make things better. That's the only thing I'll dispute. Oh yeah, it does kind of sound like the idea of them not being active, in person for 2 years may have put a few kinks in the system, you know. Recalling the aforementioned COVID-19 lockdown policies implemented throughout the world, employees stated, quote, for 2 years, everything in the entertainment events industry has been turned upside down from the inside. It's completely chaotic because we never know what rules will be or events will even happen. So everything always felt tentative, unquote. Well, my best guess is that for the majority of those 2 years, Anime Expo was probably a bare bones tiny group of people not knowing and when they were planning an event, unquote. They added, quote, event companies everywhere lost their best staff members who couldn't afford to keep working reduced hours, so many of them switched careers. It's not uncommon for event companies have to have had around 80% turnover because of COVID, which means that people making decisions are not veterans who have prior experience to build on and learn from past experiences. Quote, to end, my advice is if you know what a rule is regarding something like bringing in food or tagged cosplay weapons, which line to be in, etc., and someone is telling you different, look it up on your phone on the AX website and show them, unquote. Um, the employee then advised, quote, that person probably has very little training. If they still say no, ask them to talk to a supervisor, unquote. They ultimately concluded, quote, it's not a valid excuse, But many of those line entry people were very stressed. They were given little info and thrown out there and assigned short shifts, which they're making about $100 that day, and after taxes showed up to work find out that they had to pay for $20 to $30 parking out of that and their own pocket when their supervisors said, quote, "Hey there is $10 parking across the street, park there." Sadly, the horror stories didn't stop there, as quote as at Heat Dawkins would return to their thread on July 3rd with yet, quote, more information from a third-party staff member who confirms that hashtag Anime Expo has been a cluster bleep behind the scenes, unquote. In light of the alleged staffer story at Heat Dawkins, tagged the convention and asked if they had any plans, quote, to address any of this or pretend that your vendors and staff aren't discussing what's going on, unquote. All right, anyways. Quote, I am part of the smaller quotes third party group that was hired and in smaller quotes trained on Wednesday, unquote, said the insider. Quote, the people in charge of us are also trying to figure out what was going on, or even during training and a walkthrough, guards were they rude to were rude to. Okay, they added in a word they probably didn't. Speaking to the event behind the scenes chaos, they told at Heat Dawkins, quote, the first day of the expo, I even had a hard time getting to where I was stationed, and security didn't know how I was supposed to get there, nor did the volunteers, who aren't getting paid like me. Unquote. Yeah, if this kind of stuff keeps happening, they're going to lose the volunteers. Aren't getting, like, I think one of the things they talked about how a lot of these people are staffed there are going to probably end up moving on to other careers if this kind of garbage, continues. Quote, we also needed to call maintenance for a spill at one point, and none of the guards knew how to call them, unquote. They said, quote, we also keep telling the guards that if people coming in don't have a physical badge to send them to will call, otherwise we can't scan them in. They haven't been telling them that, and so when they get us right before the entrance, we have to be the bad guys and turn them away to get their badges. Unquote. Noting that this was their, quote, first time working for this expo, unquote, the staffer admitted, I gotta say, this is a complete mess, and they need to have everyone on the same page, especially since most of us have no idea where people need to go for things other than telling them to get a map, unquote. Okay. Quote, also about the vendors and other people like them, unquote, they added as a postscript to their message, quote, there are entrances for them to go through instead of the main ones, like everyone has to go through. I just don't know if they know where they are, unquote. That actually does sound like the case, because definitely there was a breakdown in community. Definitely there was no thought put into this, apparently. Hello. I've got a second person here. Hello. Yeah, we're reading right now how a convention can shoot itself in the foot, basically, by being so unorganized that it basically upsets everybody. Oh wait, oh, saw something there. Hey Woody, here. Hey Woody. Unsurprisingly, the hits didn't stop there as the hits as at Heat Dockin soon revealed that a fourth volunteer had, quote, in brackets, come forward with their experience working in the trenches, unquote. Subsequently claimed that, in brackets, the way they treat lower level volunteers and staff is pretty consistent with how they treat their attendees and vendors, artists, unquote. Oh, that's a good thing to hear, isn't it? Opening, quote, hi, first time volunteer here, unquote. Individual proceeded to level several accusations of poor workplace management against the convention itself. Quote, the lead volunteers have severe god complexes. They play favorites and are extremely fake to new volunteers, unquote. Quote, the Society for the Promotion of Japanese Animation, SPJA, are the higher ups, unquote. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Society for the Promotion of Japanese Animation, or the SPJA, that's the company that is that those are the big wigs that are basically putting on Anime Expo. Okay, that's the company name of the company that's running Anime Expo. Just so you know. They detailed, quote, I was, in bracket, working line control. We stand outside 8 hours in the sun. Some of us were sitting since our legs were hurting. There were no general attendees around, so we had nothing to do. We were told by our lead that some of the SPJA staff saw us sitting and were upset, unquote. Following this incident, they claimed, quote, we were not allowed to sit or squat when on the clock, unquote, taking particular issue with how these orders came from, quote, the same people that sit in air-conditioned areas for the entire day, unquote. Oh, brother. Yeah, that's got a reek of, of falsity. Quote, additionally, though, we are a part of the ticketing department, unquote. They noted, quote, those working in will car and customer service were allowed to sit in air-conditioned areas and be on their phones all day. Line control and access control people are not, unquote. Quote, the uneven work distribution is completely unfair, unquote. they summarized of their nightmarish volunteer experience. Quote, SPJA and lead volunteer staff have no appreciation for volunteers that work below them, especially for the ones who do the most physical labor. This is the kind of stuff that could theoretically shut a convention down. Because if word gets out, hey, this is not a convention that treats its staff right, treats volunteers right. People are not going to want to work there. People are not going to want to work there. People are not going to want to volunteer there. They're just going to say, so screw this. We don't want to deal with this. You know. Finally, the last of these anonymous employees who reached out to at Heat Dawkin did so to explain, quote, so I used to work early days of AX, and let me tell you something. They'd have us scrambling to beat the fire marshal, stay late hours to meet quota, wandering the streets of LA between 11 and 1 a.m., depending on when your shift ends, looking for food prior to their meal plan thing, and working areas there where we were not comfortable working. Unquote. Quote, upper management was never readily available, and lower staff had to do everything by ourselves. Unquote. They affirmed, quote, it's only when something was done right would they show their face. Yeah, get as far away when all the bad stuff happens, but like come right in when good stuff happens. Access control was a very abusive department. We dealt with everything and anything, including sexual harassment from guys. When reported, if not reported to LAPD, thank God these men are actually caring. AXSPJA would not make any movements to assist in protecting us. Unquote. Quote, same thing that happened a while ago with being attacked by weirdos for starting official lines and being constantly belittled for doing our job. Unquote. They continued. Quote, when complaining about being tired, it was told that it was a part of the department and working. Quote, hours were brutal and trying to leave when your shift ended was not a thing, unquote. The informant said before outright declaring that, quote, working the con is honestly the worst. Quote, from miscommunication between LACC, LAPD, temp staff, and upper management to God complex department heads, it's straight garbage. I learned my lesson after I had beef with a lead back then. He really thought he was the bleep. Truly, he was the bleep, a piece of bleep. Oh boy. Anyways. Uh, Where are we at on the hour? Coming up on an hour and a half. Spent quite a bit of time on this Anime Expo article, but there's so much to really delve into here. The former Anime Expo employee finished their message by providing advice to aspiring Anime Expo employees, writing, quote, word of advice to anyone. I think that's supposed to be that is, not is that they should be careful on who they talk to and what they say, unquote. Quote, people are only trying to climb on top of each other and use each other to get into higher positions, unquote. They described of the convention's work environment, quote, anyways, that's one of my main pieces I stay at. Many pieces I stay at. Also, not to mention the hiring and the difference between staff, volunteers, and temps provided by LACC. Quote, temps get hired on only a few days before the con with minimal training, unquote, the informant recalled. Quote, they usually come ask AS staff things. Volunteers come through if they want to from being a regular con goer to a volunteer staff. They get no benefits, maybe a badge refund or something like that. They get trained for whatever department they work for that day. So they literally only have training for that department. Staff are the ones who get most of the benefits, such as hotels and stipend. They too sometimes are hired a few days before the con and go through a very rushed training, unquote. Quote, I'm not making any excuses for them or anything. Like, drag TF out of this con for being disorganized. But there's several different levels, unquote. They close their message, quote, I don't blame anyone below department leads, unquote. Yeah, because your foot soldiers are your ones who are dealing with the most, who are dealing most directly with people, with the public, with with other staff. They're the most directly involved. Let's see. However, poorly trained staff and a lack of internal communication were not the only issues plaguing this year's Anime Expo. As seen in footage tweeted by Anime News Network, entrance into Los Angeles Convention Center was shut down just hours into the convention's opening hours, as a local fire marshal had deemed the amount of attendees within the building to have hit unsafe levels. Considering, in parentheses here, considering the violations occurred in Artist Alley, Anime Expo is lucky the fire marshal did not shut down the convention. Unparentheses. There's chaos on the show floor was also documented by Fox Estacado, who shared the footage to his YouTube channel. One attendee, Kizu Nagacha, claimed to have had a violent encounter with the convention security, tweeting on July 4th, quote, on my way out today, a security guard stopped me and told me that I had to come with him and to take the Kazune standee that I bought from the Sundaria booth. He told me I stole it, and I thought he was joking. So I told him to back off, and then another security guard grabbed me on the shoulder, yanked me around, and said, quote, "Then you're going to be explaining this to the LAPD," unquote. Yeah, I don't know if even private security really have such authority to be laying their hands on people like that, at least here in California. I mean, quote, "After I realized that they were serious, I told them that I thought I bought it, and even showed the receipt as proof that I didn't steal them," unquote. He added, quote, "But they didn't believe me and said it could have been from anything. So he had to take me to the booth that had the standee taken from them, and I was just sobbing uncontrollably." Yeah, that is kind of sleepy. Oh, and of course, once we got to the booth, um, they immediately confirmed that it wasn't the stolen standee. Um, the booth staff apologized to me, even though it wasn't their fault, but the security didn't want to be responsible for being in the wrong and how much distress they caused me, unquote. He concluded, quote, "And of course, Kazune was handled roughly by the security and bent in half, um, completely. I spent so much money for him to only be beaten up by the end of the day," unquote. That is kind of garbage. Sharing an image of the standee at Kizu Nagacha added, quote, "By the way, con security thought Kazune was the stolen standee from the exhibit hall, and they grabbed us pretty roughly and had to take us to the booth to prove it's not him. The booth wasn't at fault at all, by the way. I just wish security wasn't so rough with me. I cried so hard." Sharing a further image depicting what appears to be a series of red finger-like marks upon his collarbone, at Kizu Nagacha, um, concluded, quote, thanks at Anime Expo Con Security for grabbing me so hard for a cardboard standee that I'm starting to bruise. Kazune looks nothing like the character, too. Sheesh. Further, despite having previously kowtowed to public complaints over the event's rollback decision to drop their vaccine mandate by re-implementing their requirements, uh, that guests provide proof of vaccination. That guests provide proof of vaccination or a negative COVID test in order to enter the convention hall. Several individuals, such as quote at Abby Sterling, at Melda de C cubes, um, Melt Edisi cubes, and Hikaizio claimed that said policies were not even being enforced. Oh, we're eating breakfast, and these bleep next to us are trying to sneak their friend a vaccination wristband into Khan, unquote, tweeted the latter. Quote, partner told him how easy it is to get your own wristband, and he responds with small quotes, oh, I didn't know. Um, while his friends are like in smaller quotes, we just thought it was funny, unquote, unsmaller quotes. Quote tweeting a report from Anime News Network itself based on a tweet threat by Nickelpin at Nickelpin, in which the outlet informed readers that, quote, artist reported lightheadedness, seek nausea, and headache um, amid CO2 levels that reached well into unhealthy zones amid poor to non-existent mask enforcement um, by AX volunteers and staff, unquote, at Hikazio confirmed, quote, I was getting vertigo, lightheaded, and ringing in my ears every day that I left Kintia Hall. Quote, I've never experienced anything like this in the dozen of conventions I've been to, quote, she said. Quote, not to mention only half of the attendees were masked at the time. Artist Alley staff this year was much more understanding, unquote. She noted, quote, they were kind to us, but ultimately they seemed severely understaffed, and I don't blame them for not being able to handle mask enforcement. This is a manpower issue that should have been managed by SPGA's management, unquote. All right, I gotta step away one more time to make some lighting adjustments. I'll be right back, of course, after I. I am back. Let's continue on here. So, imagine trying to enforce masks as volunteers with very little support in the organization you work for, unquote, he included. Quote, they didn't even have masks to give out, unquote. And to this end, several attendees, including at from Calico, at Ivory Ice, at Luna Urum, at Chibi Chanchibi at Loki Roki, and the aforementioned at Fox Estacado walked away from the convention with an extra souvenir testing positive for COVID-19 upon their respective arrivals home. Another artist in Artist Alley at Fox Estacado documented the chaos occurring on the Artist Art Alley floor throughout the convention. So basically that's all that we have on that one. Pretty much, it just sounds like AX is just so freaking disorganized that really was shooting themselves in the foot there. Anyways, let me. Alright, so anyways, and I'll get ready to head on into some more comics coverage here. Alright, so getting into some comic book coverage here, let's see. Boom Studios and IDW to reunite the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for a second comic book crossover. Article by Spencer McCooley, published yesterday. What may be the last two even remotely readable major Western comic book properties are set to share the Morphin Grid once more, as Boom Studios and IDW have announced that the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are headed for another crossover adventure. As revealed by the publisher on July 21st, this December, we'll see veteran Power Rangers line writer and current self-titled Power Rangers book author Ryan Parrott team up with fan favorite cover artist Dan Mora to pen a follow-up to his original miniseries, aptly titled Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, which will see the two iconic teen crime-fighting teams coming together once again to save the world from a rising danger that threatens to bring both teams to the brink. Unquote. So, the first Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles team up resulted in iconic moments such as the reveal of the Green Ranger Shredder, the Ninja Rangers, and the mighty Turtle Zord. Okay, unquote. Exclaimed Boom Studio senior editor Daphne Frieden. In promotion of the upcoming story, a quote, but if you think there's nothing that could top that, just wait till you see what's up next for both teams as they face familiar faces in the next set of villains in an adventure full of new shocking twists and turns. Unquote. While Boom Studios is keeping mum on the plot's details for now, it will be interesting to see how, if at all, Parrot and Mora incorporate the numerous canon developments that occurred in each respective comic line in the 2 years since the release of the first crossover into the second outing. For example, in New York City, recent events have seen the Turtles um, in seen the Turtles have expanded beyond their basic four-member weapon-based team format, adding the female ninja Janika to their lineup, and they're working together with Shredder himself. Meanwhile, in Angel Grove, the Rangers line has seen the core team undergo their first major lineup change, with Jason, Zach, and Trini graduating to the roles of Omega Rangers and White Ranger, respectively, and leaving Rocky, Zach, Aisha, and Matthew to succeed them in their original mantles. Further, the publisher has begun to not only introduce concurrent Ranger teams, most notably the Space Rangers, but also the franchise's own crisis-level threat in the Death Ranger. Two developments which could allow the upcoming crossover to explore a less grounded, more, in smaller quotes, multiversal storyline in comparison to its predecessor. Hasbro's Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Lightning Collection line will start to get more figure fodder when the first issue of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 shelves in December 2022. Alright, so there we go with that one. We're about halfway through these articles. We'll be right back as I do need to step away from the computer for a moment. I'll be right back. All the rhythm. I get a. Hey, Meme. Oh, what's up? Not much. I'm gonna zone out here for a moment. All right, sorry about that. I had to make some adjustments here because there's something weird with my computer. Sometimes it will do things um, that are just not exactly like kosher. So, anyways, hey, maybe I see that you're there. Let me go ahead and share the screen I had up but from before. So, if you can like and share the stream, I'd appreciate it. We are now getting ready to get into the next article here. Alrighty then. So, IDW announces "quote unquote" encore to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles last running called "quote unquote" the Lost Years. Articles from by J.B. Augustine published earlier today. All right, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin was supposed to be a dystopian last chapter for the heroes in a half shell. In parentheses, until you get to the ending. But regardless, the creators teased more was coming from quote unquote Roninverse earlier this year. Heroes in a half shell, turtle power. They are keeping their word. Last Ronin artisans Kevin Eastman and series veteran Tom Waltz are teaming with artist S.L. Gallant and returning artist Ben Bishop for the 5-issue miniseries Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, The Lost Years from IDW. Eastman wants to quote unquote dig deeper into the world he and Peter Laird started over 30 years ago, when the story was in cold storage. Quote, continuing to expand on an idea Peter Laird and I had 35 years ago with this incredible creative team has been the adventure of a lifetime, unquote, said Eastman in a press release. Heroes in a half shell, turtle power. They're the world's most fearsome fighting team. When the evil Shredder attacks, these turtle boys don't cut him no slack. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, heroes than a half shell, turtle power. Quote, to continue exploring and telling stories within the Last Ronin universe couldn't possibly be more exciting for me, unquote. He added, quote, I'm so thrilled we get to stay and play here for a while, and I can't wait to share everything we have planned. Buckle up, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fans. We've got two total universes that are both about to get seriously awesome. Cowabunga, dude! Eastman and Walt started with the Frank Miller inspired outline from 1987, but realized they could go further once the story was complete. Quote, but as time passed, we began to realize that Last Ronin's story was so much bigger than we had originally anticipated, past, present, and future. There's so much more about this world that we still want to share with our fans, said Waltz. Quote, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin, The Lost Years, represents the first expansion of what we now fondly call the Roninverse, in smaller quotes. It offers our many loyal readers a much more detailed look at the Ronin's past, as well as sharing a glimpse of an exciting future for the many allies he's been forced to leave behind, unquote, he added. IDW's Ninja Turtles editor, Charles Beecham, promises the Lost Years will be bigger than the last saga. Quote, Kevin, Tom, and Ben set big expectations with The Last Ronin, but that was only the beginning, unquote. He said, quote, with Lost Years, we're going bigger, digging deeper, giving fans a more of what they didn't even know they wanted. This is the start of an all-new chapter for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. You won't want to miss it. When the evil Shredder attacks, these turtle boys might come no slack. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant. For further details about the plot, you have to be patient. Most of it is still close to everyone's chest. Quote, it's all very top secret at the moment. Ben Bishop confides, adding the art, in his opinion, is more like what the old school fans appreciate. Quote, I will say this. Believe it or not, even more so than the original Last Ronin series, the stuff I get to draw in the Lost Years is an old school Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle kid's wildest dream come true, unquote. Bishop continued. Quote, I'm so excited to get the gang back together so we can expand even more of this world we've been building, not only in The Last Ronin, but Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle as a whole, unquote. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin, The Lost Years, number 1, is available in stores in this November. There will be 3 covers to choose from. Cover A by Kevin Eastman and Ben Bishop, cover B by S.L. Gallant, and a retailer incentive edition of cover B by Mike Deodato. Does world building in the Roninverse pique your interest? Sound off in your comments. Sound off in the comments. Yeah, I'd say it does. So we got through 4 of the 6 articles thus far. It should be pretty quick as well. Okay, so here's our animation story, as it were. 10 best Batman Beyond villains. Article by Frank Martin, published earlier today. Between drug overdoses and killer sex robots, it's hard not to realize that Batman Beyond is a show ahead of its time. It was about a troubled youth trying to find his way in the world and realizing that way is through helping others. Yeah, it was a cool show. Any comic book fan knows that a hero is only as good as his villains. For facing a futuristic society, Batman Beyond needed futuristic villains that challenged both his own sensibilities as much as his new technologically advanced world. Number 10, the Royal Flush Gang. And from left to right there, you have 10, King, Ace, Queen, and Jack. The Royal Flush Gang was notable for several reasons. First off, they are a continuation of villains from Batman's era, but they hold other distinctions for Batman Beyond. First off, they are a family, which holds a certain significance for Terry McGinnis, who lost his father at the start of the series. Then there's Melanie. She's a troubled member of the Royal Flush Gang and potential love interest for Terry. That doesn't mean he doesn't care about his girlfriend Dana, but Batman, any Batman, can never resist a bad girl. A la Selena Kyle. A la Selena Kyle, aka Catwoman. And as Melanie tries to right her wrongs, she offers a very unique temptation for him. Ian Peake. Ian Peake isn't a particularly prominent Batman, but yeah, he only had one appearance. Okay. As he only appeared in one episode. But that didn't mean he wasn't particularly effective. He's essentially a journalist that found a way to make himself intangible. This allowed him to get scoops he otherwise wouldn't have. Basically, he got hold of some kind of handheld, like almost phasing cloaking device, basically. Only problem is that there were some things about it. What made him so dangerous is that he was in a prime position to expose Batman's identity. Very few have gotten this close to revealing Bruce Wayne's true nature, which allows Peake a spot on this list. But like most villains, his greed cost him everything in the end. Which is true, as the device malfunctioned and it ended up basically having him pass through any and all matter. It's like till he hit, basically he was just affected by gravity to the point to where, and we don't know if he ended up dying from this, but the theory was that he fell all the way to the center of the earth, which of course is just a molten core, so once he probably got there, he may have just been incinerated. Mikestand, number 8 here. All superheroes need to have throwaway villains. These are the C-listers that are put into a story for no other purpose than a villain needs to challenge the hero as a distraction. That's where Mikestand comes in. Typically, Mikestand has some grudge against either government or some other institution, and his solution is simply to blow it up. He's a very one-dimensional villain, but when the plot is focused elsewhere, he's a perfect stand-in to give Batman a beating. Mm-hmm. Number 7, Shriek. Some of the best villains are those that have a personal grudge against the hero. Batman doesn't really have any grudge against Shriek, but given that he's a villain that focused on sound, he has a very particular grudge against Batman for making him deaf. Mm-hmm. What's also interesting about Shriek is that he's technically a genius when it comes to sound engineering. He could use sound waves in very interesting ways to terrorize and manipulate Gotham. Those are the most dangerous villains, as Batman can never quite predict how they'll attack. Basically, a mad genius or a mad scientist, basically. Somebody who's, intellect, can match Bruce. Obviously the intellect doesn't match Terry's not quite on the same level intellectually wise as Bruce, but still he manages. The brain trust. The idea behind the brain trust is not a particularly original one. The concept is essentially similar to mutants and X-Men. Certain people are born with abilities, and a secret group of them try to recruit their own. But there is nothing especially sinister about the brain trust. The first appearance revolves around the kidnapping of a little girl and Batman's search for her. The powers of the other brain trust members create unique challenges for Batman, and the fact that they operate in a group makes them much more dangerous. And brain trust, okay, even though they were introduced in Batman, they also made an appearance in the Zeta Project as well. And the character Bombshell, I think they redid her character design for the Zeta Project. Number 5, Terrari. It's hard to think of any Batman Beyond foe that's as true a fighter as Terrari. She's a member of the Society of Assassins that Batman foiled from eliminating her target, forcing her to go on the run. Terrari is a fairly one-dimensional villain. She never speaks and is driven only by her mission to kill. That probably makes her more dangerous, not less. Her propensity for weapons and combat makes her a particularly lethal foe, especially for Terry, who doesn't have the same kind of training. Yeah, he doesn't have the same kind of training as Terrari. He doesn't have the same kind of training as Batman. But of course, you can draw comparisons. Okay, so Terrari and Terry. Okay, Bruce had people like Lady Shiva and David Kane to deal with in his rogues gallery. Number 4, Stalker. Stalker is essentially a ripoff of Kraven the Hunter. He shows up in Gotham to take down Batman as he views him as the ultimate hunt. It's hard to find a distinction between the two characters, but that doesn't mean Stalker isn't any less an iconic villain. Seeing him use the streets and skyline of Gotham like his own personal jungle is pretty cool. Fans have gotten used to seeing stuff like this in a modern city. But considering that Gotham is now futuristic, there's something extra special about seeing a classic hunter motif in this sci-fi series. That's kind of true. You got a sci-fi environment there with primal mixing with a primal aspect there. Number 3, Spellbinder. Some of the best classic Batman villains are those that border the cerebral rather than the physical. These are foes like Scarecrow and the Mad Hatter. Spellbinder fits right into this category. He's essentially a psychologist that has found a way to manipulate the mind into doing or seeing exactly what he wants. This makes him a particularly tricky foe, as he can hide in the shadows without Batman even knowing he's behind the plot. Now, mind you, yes, and we saw it. Now, mind you, this Spellbinder is a unique creation. This Spellbinder was actually created for the DCAU because the Batman does have, I think, actually has a couple of character villains named Spellbinder who are a little bit different. One, I think, is a hypnotist. This guy was kind of a DCAU creation. Number 2, Ink. Ink holds the distinction of being the first true supernatural threat Terry faces. And she's a doozy too. As basically a living goo that can take any form she wants. This makes her super powerful and clever in a way that makes her extremely difficult to defeat. She can be, well, if not for the ink aspect of it, she could be a pretty good femme fatale too. There are several times that she could have ended Batman, and he only narrowly escaped death. To make matters worse, Ink is not really her own villain. She's essentially a mercenary for hire, which means Batman never quite knows when she'll get involved. And number 1, Blight. And Blight was the one who initially hired Ink. He was heavily involved in like the first season into the early second season. And then there's Derek Powers, of course, Blight. Blight will take the top spot as he was the main villain through the entirety of Batman's first season. He was even responsible for Terry becoming Batman in the first place. What's strange is that Batman was also responsible for his creation when Derek Powers was inadvertently exposed to the deadly virus that forced him to undergo radical radiation treatment. What's terrifying about Blight is not just his immense power, but also his savvy business acumen. Many of Batman's villains don't have huge aspirations for conquest, but Blight doesn't just want to hurt his enemies, he wants to destroy them. Now, in a way, you can argue that Blight is a Batman Beyond version of Lex Luthor, or what Lex Luthor was representing in the DCAU. Kind of a very smart businessman who, prior to being exposed to the gas and, getting to a point where he could no longer maintain his skin, he could have passed for somebody in a way to where he could have continued running his businesses and maybe even getting to the point to where he was at one point going to try to run it from behind the scenes through his son, but that didn't work out as his son ended up trying to betray him so he could basically take the company for himself. And the last article we're going to look at tonight, I still, of course, have the wrestling wrap to do, so I have to go through that a lot more quicker than I initially thought. All right. The last article of the night here. 10 villains that tortured Spider-Man the most. Article by Frank Martin, published earlier today. More from the comic book section. It's a well-known fact that a hero can usually be defined by the notoriety of his or her villainous enemies. It's hard to think of any hero that has been put through the ringer more and suffered more torturous tragedy than Spider-Man. It might be because the wall crawler's relentless idealism, or maybe because he attracts tragedy just because of his character. But regardless of the circumstances, he's been through a lot of heartache, drama in his life. Most of it caused by villains who he's encountered along the way. Number 10, Anna Kramenov, which I guess might be Craven's daughter. Yep. Although she might not be considered a powerhouse villain of Spider-Man's, it's hard to overlook exactly what Craven's daughter put him through. A lot of people want to take revenge on Spider-Man, but her gauntlet was relentless. She manipulated and arranged for every one of Spidey's classic villains to challenge him and wear him down. By the end of the campaign, Spidey was so exhausted that Anna, who was essentially a kid at the time, was able to enact such a master plan. Number 9, the Kingpin, Wilson Fisk. And Kingpin, from what I understand, is actually more of a Daredevil villain, but Kingpin kind of has, being that he is the Kingpin of crime, he has many enemies, as it were. Much like Daredevil, Spider-Man had always had a particular grudge against the Kingpin. Of course, he's always faced off against various supervillain crime bosses like Tombstone and Hammerhead, but there's something about Kingpin, a model of corruption that goes against the very ideals Spidey is fighting to uphold. Wilson Fisk has really traumatized Spider-Man on a personal level, but Wilson Fisk hasn't really traumatized Spider-Man on a personal level, but he's that one nagging force in New York City's underworld that will always be there. Kingpin will never be gone for good, and because of that, he's the one foe Spider-Man will always have to contend with. And we actually saw a lot of that aspect in the mid '90s Spider-Man, the 1994 Spider-Man the animated series show. They really did do a doozy on that one. Um, number 8, Venom. I know I gotta probably start through this. Already coming up on an hour and a half. Given that he's now pretty much solidified as an anti-hero, envisioning Venom as a villain that tortured Spider-Man. But when he first emerged on the scene, Venom had a huge grudge against the Wallcrawler. The black suit symbiote had taken a toll on Spider-Man all by himself when it bonded with Eddie Brock, a man who had just as much animosity for the hero. The amalgamated Venom went for the jugular by kidnapping Mary Jane. They would eventually reconcile as bigger threats emerged, but the confrontation traumatized Spider-Man so much that he gave up the black suit because of it. Number 7, the Jackal. The Clone Saga is very often ridiculed by fans, and rightly so. It was goofy at its worst and short-sighted at best. But that didn't mean it didn't take its toll on Spider-Man from the beginning to end. And it all started with the Jackal. From clones of himself to his dead girlfriend Gwen Stacy, Peter Parker had a lot to deal with thanks to Miles Warren. Later on, it became even more troublesome when Ben Reilly and Kane emerged onto the scene, as well as a twisted version of Miles Warren named Carrion. Regardless of the legacy of the Clone Saga, the Jackal certainly did a number on Spider-Man because of it. Even take into account the fact that he first brought us the Punisher. Number 6, Dr. Octopus. From the very beginning, Dr. Octopus has always been a menacing threat to Spider-Man, as evidenced by the fact that he formed the Sinister Six to take him down. There are tons of examples of how Doc Ock did a number on Spidey, but the most recent example of when he became the superior Spider-Man might be the worst. He didn't just manage to kill Peter Parker. He also took over his life and wreaked havoc on it for a fairly long time. It was such an ordeal that Peter had a lot to make up for when he eventually reclaimed his body. I wonder if this had anything to do with why Peter now is, nobody wants to talk to Peter now in the modern era here. The latest start. Number 5, Kraven the Hunter. Very few villains have single-handedly beaten Spider-Man the way Kraven did. It was such a monumental victory that quote, Kraven's Last Hunt, unquote, has become a landmark Spider-Man story. Of course, no villain stays dead forever. Kraven and his saga have continued on past his death. Nick Spencer's run on Amazing Spider-Man has garnered mixed reviews, but a highlight was when Kraven started a hunt involving Spider-Man and other animal-themed villains in Central Park. Number 4, Harry Osborne, who eventually became the Green Goblin, of course. Harry Osborne is a tragic figure himself, but he has done a fairly decent job of terrorizing Spider-Man. In spite of that, besides the fact he became the second Green Goblin, he also arranged for Spider-Man's parents to return as clones to terrorize him. More recently, Harry also returned as a demonic Kindred to emotionally torture Peter again. As a villain, Kindred had a mixed reception, but there's no denying that he certainly knew how to torture Peter. start to finish, by bringing his dead loved ones back for a bizarre dinner party. Herman Osborne, the original Green Goblin. It's not surprising that Sam Raimi chose Green Goblin to be the villain in the first Spider-Man movie. Norman Osborn, perhaps Spider-Man's one true nemesis, and has tortured him more than any other supervillain. A list could be made of all the devilish deeds Green Goblin has done to Spider-Man, but it's hard to think of one that tops the death of Gwen Stacy. Despite having a great relationship with MJ, Peter's first true love will always be Gwen, and he will never forgive Norman for taking her away from him. Number 2, J. Jonah Jameson. The only thing is that JJ, I don't think is really a villain per se, but let's see what Frank has to say about this. He's an adversary, for sure. And yeah, he probably has tortured Spider-Man in a way because of his hatred for masks. But Jonah Jameson and Spider-Man have a very long and interesting history, probably more complicated than any other relationship in the Marvel Universe. Since he has become a champion for Spider-Man, it's hard to remember a time when Jonah was a Spidey critic. When looked at over the course of Spider-Man's career, Jonah caused a lot of grief and headaches for the Wallcrawler. This includes being critical of him in the Daily Bugle to creating the Spider Slayers, and even having a hand in Matt Gargan becoming the Scorpion. It's a brutal relationship that was really fleshed out in Spider-Man Life Story. The Burglar. Oh yes, this is the burglar. This is the guy who essentially was how everything started with Spider-Man. This is akin to Joe Chill for Batman. When it comes to Spider-Man and the emotional torture he's had to endure, one person stands at the top of the list. Fans of Spidey have to remember that he gained his powers as a high schooler who thought they were the coolest thing in the world. To have the entire world turned upside down by the death of his father figure must have been heart-wrenching. The burglar that ended up taking Uncle Ben's life might not have been a supervillain, but he certainly changed the entire course of Spider-Man's life. That one disastrous decision for Spider-Man to let him go sent the youngster, on a path of guilt that would drive his heroics his entire life. That kind of deep characterization is hard to top. That situation right there is what led to the saying, with great power comes great responsibility. So there we go. With that one. Let's see. Let's see. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I do know that I have. So I do, I'm going to do a very quickie wrestling wrap up here. Let's see, we're already past the 2 hour and a half mark. Okay. So anyways, so we're going to do some quick wrestling. So WWE, of course, is preparing for SummerSlam this weekend. Jeff Jarrett himself will have a very busy weekend as he'll be participating in both SummerSlam on Saturday and then the Jim Crockett Promotions event on Sunday. So heading into SummerSlam here, some of the big matches that have been announced for the for the unified titles, Roman Reigns is going to be defending against Brock Lesnar in the last man standing match. You also have for the unified tag team titles, you have the Usos defending against the Street Profits. You have and the women will also be defending their respective titles. Bianca Belair will be defending the Raw Women's Championship against Becky Blair. Becky mentioned they basically had kind of a brawl happen last night on Raw, and then you have I'm trying to think here. Then you'll have Liv Morgan defending the SmackDown Women's title against Ronda Rousey. Bobby Lashley will be defending the United States Heavyweight title, Austin Theory. Now with Vince gone, now it's been announced that Triple H is essentially taken over creative. He's taken over the writing team. So you're going to probably see some major things happening. You're going to probably see some major changes as, obviously Hunter and Stephanie have a different creative direction than Vince did. And a lot of the talent are more appreciative of that fact. We've heard of some talent saying they wouldn't go back to WWE while Vince was still there. Now, there's also been some talk that Vince may now be under federal investigation due in part to the hush money scandal. But again, some of the other matches on the undercard include the Mysterios taking on Ray and Dominique taking on Judgment Day. You have Pat McAfee taking on Happy Corbin. Seth Rollins will be taking on Riddle at SummerSlam. So I have a lot to look forward to there. And then I did say that Jeff Jarrett was going to be busy this weekend because at SummerSlam he's the special guest referee for the World Tag Team match between Usos and Street Profits. So that will be part of it. And then with Jarrett, we're going to do a bit of a segue. So Saturday is SummerSlam, and on Sunday, Jim Crockett Promotions, under the ownership now of Jim's senior son, David Crockett, and Conrad Thompson. Conrad Thompson, who's done a few of the podcasts or something, like Something to Wrestle with Bruce Pritchard, and what happened when with Tony Schiavone, Grilling, all that. Two of them are promoting an event at the Nashville Municipal Auditorium on Sunday, where the main event is to feature Ric Flair's last match. Ric Flair will be teaming with his son-in-law, his most recent son-in-law, Andre El Idolo, taking on the tag team of Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal with Karen Jarrett in their corner. Among some of the other matches, including a bunkhouse battle royal, you have there's only a couple title defenses going on. Impact, and basically this card is being promoted by Jim Crockett Promotions, but you're going to have talent in there from AEW, Impact Wrestling, NWA, Ring of Honor. Have a couple four-way matches going on there. So the two title matches that will be happening there. Josh Alexander will be defending the Impact World title against Jacob Fatu, and then in a triple threat match, Jordan Grace will be defending the Impact Women's Knockouts title again in a three-way match against Diona Purrazzo and Rachel Ellering, of course, the daughter of the daughter of Paul Ellering, the former manager of Legion of Doom. In a couple of interesting matchups you have in one match, Battle of Brothers between Jay and Mark Briscoe versus the Von Erich brothers, Marshall and Ross Von Erich, sons of Kevin Von Erich. You also will have Arn Anderson leading his son Brock Anderson into and Brian Pillman Jr. to take on the Mortons, father and son duo of Ricky and Kerry Morton, with Robert Gibson in their corner. Some of the participants in the Bunkhouse Battle Royal include Bully Ray. Everybody remembers him as Bubba Ray Dudley. Crowbar. Wolfie D will apparently be coming out of retirement to participate. Crimson. Jonathan Grisham, coming off of his loss, and we'll talk about that in a moment, his loss of the Ring of Honor, will be participating in a four-way match there. Have another four-way match involving Laredo Kid, Black Taurus, Ray Phoenix, and Bandito. So that's all coming up. Also, speaking of Ring of Honor, Death Before Dishonor. So I was basically wrong. Well, for the most part, I did see most of the titles being retained, but they did put all the titles on all the faces. So, including the six-man title, which I had only more recently found out. So Dalton Castle and the Boys became the new World Six-Man Tag Championships. And in the other title change, Claudio Castagnoli did in fact defeat Jonathan Grisham for title. Hey, Woody. Thanks for coming back. I am getting into some wrestling news now. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I am pushing it to 3 hours. Wasn't necessarily my intention though to do so, but essentially what the Anime Expo story I did earlier really there was a lot more commentary on it for me on that than I realized. So because that one was kind of a bad situation where apparently if it's not really a good thing to work or volunteer for Anime Expo. Let's see. So who is Flair going to wrestle in his final match? He's slated to participate in a tag match against where he's teaming up with his son-in-law, Andrade El Idolo. That's his most recent son. That's the one who just married Charlotte. They'll be teaming up to face off against Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal, who will have Karen Jarrett in Jeff's corner. So that's what is fun. But people are even saying he may not be able to wrestle in the match because aside from his other health issues like his bad heart, he's apparently also got a broken foot right now. So now I agree with a lot of people. I don't think he should have been trying to have this match in the first place. Dude, 73 years old. He's got a pacemaker in his heart from a heart attack he had back in the late 90s. But cool. Thanks for that info. Well, I got more wrestling news. Wrap up with quickly. I was just talking about Ring of Honor. Also, Impact Wrestling will be having their next big pay-per-view in a few weeks here at Emergence on Friday, August 12th, in which It's already been already signed. Knockout champion Jordan Grace. She's still the champion at that point, in which I don't see why not. But she's slated to defend the title against Mia Yim, and then I think they just, and I don't know if they're signing it as we speak, but Josh Alexander will be defending the Impact World Championship against Alex Shelley at Emergence. So, and also AEW on AEW's Dynamite tomorrow night have a series of matches. Thunder Rosa will be defending the AEW Women's Championship against Miyu Yamashita. Brian Danielson will be making his return. He'll be taking on Daniel Garcia of the Jericho Appreciation Society. We'll probably get a chance to see Claudio Castagnoli first appearance since winning the Ring of Honor championship. So now the Blackpool Combat Club has two Ring of Honor in the AEW. And Jon Moxley, I believe, will be defending the interim world title as well. And you got Swerve Strickland in a handicap match against Mark Sterling and Tony Nese, in which his partner, Limitless Keith Lee, will be banned from ringside. So that's a lot of the wrestling news we got for you. So with that, we're going to start to wrap up here because, as you pointed out, Woody, I really did come pretty close here to putting on a 3-hour show here. Again, not originally my intent, but sometimes that just happens. And sometimes 1-hour shows or like 15-minute shows sometimes happen. But with that, so today being Tuesday, July 26th, 2022, let's go ahead and take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. 62, 2012, 2017, and then 2007. All right, so here we go with all this then. Nietzsche history. Ready? Yeah, this is the first time in a while that I've actually seen you be here during Nietzsche history. But anyways, let's get to it. So the first off, we're going to go back 60 years ago today, as on this date in 1962, 60 years ago today, the first issue of Felix the Cat, a short, like a 12-issue series that ran in Dell, was a bi-monthly issue. The first issue of Felix the Cat from Dell Comics went on sale on this date back in 1962. Sold for 12 cents and was had 32 pages in it. So on this date back in 1962, the issue number 1 of Felix the Cat from Dell Comics went on sale that day. Moving on to the next piece of Nietzsche history. We go back just 15 years ago today. And on this date, 15 years ago today, the anime Bakano premiered. Brain Base's Bakano would debut on this date in Japan on the Wow Wow network back in 2007. So 15 years ago today, Bakano would debut on 12 cents, 32 pages. Wow. Yeah. That's like two pages for every cent there. Okay, so anyways, getting back to the thing here. So that 2007, the anime Bakano. Then moving on to 2012 will be our next stop, which is 10 years ago today. As on this date, 10 years ago today in 2012, of course, prior to his call up to the WWE, Seth Rollins would win a tournament to become the first NXT champion. So on this date, 10 years ago today, Seth Rollins would win the tournament to become the first NXT champion. That's a wrestling champion. That's not the television show. Okay, and last but not least, on this date, 5 years ago today, 2017, on Nickelodeon, the Fairly Odd Parents would complete their run on this date in 2017. On this date in 2017, the Fairly Odd Parents would complete their run on Nicktoons after having been on Nickelodeon for a while. So Fairly Odd Parents would basically be canceled in 2017, completing their run. So with that, guys, I thank you for being here tonight. I hope you all had fun. No, we spent quite a bit of time on the Anime Expo story in particular. And with that, Fairly Odd Parents, what a great show, yeah. And it was canceled 5 years ago today. So with that, I thank you guys for being here. I hope to see you all back here tomorrow night. Of course, don't forget, Fridays are weekly look back at comics history. Will be, RJ Carter will be joining me from Critical Blast. We'll be looking at we'll be finishing up our March of 1939 coverage, in which we'll be looking at comics that went on sale comics that went on sale from Quality Comics. We'll probably be focusing in on feature funnies, volume 1, number 20. So until tomorrow, bye.